Can we just talk? We just talk. Can we just talk about where we're going?
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having us here tonight. It's a pleasure to see you all. And I guess maybe I would start out by giving my thanks to all of you. I'm going to be serving my last legislative session here in a couple months, and have decided that 28 years serving this district has been a long time, but it has also been one of the greatest joys and tremendous honors that I've ever had in my life. And many, if some or any of you, could very well be responsible for helping me be in office, and I just want to thank you up front. It's not always This district has always been very unique in that it's very bipartisan, and that we tend to have legislators from this district who do great things that frankly often entail reaching across the aisle and working with our counterparts in the Democratic Party. And so again, I would just like to personally, on a personal note, because this is a kind of an emotional year for me, I'm going to be taking that last ride in the legislative session, and even though that 60-day session may be short, it is furious. And so we're all gearing up and eating our cornflakes and drinking lots of power drinks so that we're going to be able to get through it. And again, I just want to thank you. I have no agenda for this next year. I could quack here like a lame duck, but that's not really the way I would operate anyway. And the one nice thing is that I've always been fairly good at communicating with folks on the other side of the aisle and in my own party to try to get some good legislation that is frankly legislation I've been very proud of being involved with. That's our early learning system and the things that we can do to help empower parents to be better parents and make sure our families are strong. And that's always been my focus in the legislature. I'm proud of my work in the early learning arena, and I will continue to promote that. I think it's kind of taken on a life of its own, which has been a joy to see. I also want to make sure, though, that we do have fair taxation and that we are treated equally on the east side of the state here. We bring a tremendous amount of wealth and revenue to the coffers in the state of Washington, and we deserve to have the benefits that often Western Washington appears to get over Eastern Washington. So I will continue in my fight to make sure that we are represented well, and that the governor understands that Eastern Washington is vitally important to his success as well. And so I guess that would be my ultimate quote-unquote agenda this session. But again, on a more personal note, I want to thank you all for your support these many years, and tell you again how privileged and honored I've been to serve you.
And thank you, Maureen, for your mentorship and everything that you've done in the time that you've been not only a senator, but a legislator and a legislative aide. And you've done a great job for the district. I'm Bill Jenkin, and I'm really having a lot of fun representing you, because it is all about you, and have really, I think, been effective in doing it. I'm a fiscal conservative, and I do know a lot like what Maureen said. In order to be effective, you do have to learn to work across the aisle. The first couple of years when I was in the legislature, what you hear from everybody is not exactly sit down and shut up, but sit down and listen and learn, and come up and try to be as effective as you can for those first 2 years. And really that's what I did. And so this past year, when session started, the caucus, I guess, must have realized that and was given some leadership roles in so that we have ranking members, which means when you're in the minority, you have the ranking members, and when you're in the majority, you have the chair and the vice chairs. So it was given a ranking position on the community development, housing, and veterans affairs. We also work with disaster relief. So it's a real, I think, community-wise, I mean, that's the name of the title in the committee, community development. And you can really be effective, and you do have to work across the aisle on that committee, because think of the issues that we've been having to deal with as far as affordable housing. And that's going to be on the forefront this session. There will be a lot. And that was one of the few committees, there was 3, I believe, that Skyler Root was very instrumental, and he'll talk a little bit about remote testimony. But our committee is one of the ones that will be a part of that. So to give you an opportunity to contact, and I really hope that you will contact me to get some things done in that regard for remote testimony. We need to know a week ahead of time. I also am on the Commerce and Gaming, which regulates alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis. I have a winery, so that really helps in that regard, and we'll continue working hard for some of the issues. And also the final one is capital budget, and I think that's important to bring state money home to the district. And the 3 of us did a very good job of doing that this last session. So thank you so much. I look forward to hearing your questions, and I want to hear from you so that we can get your priorities back there, not so much telling you about me. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Skyler, your newest representative. First, I just wanted to thank the local Democrats for hosting this. This is bipartisanship at work, and I think it's really important that we take these opportunities to have community discussions. So I serve on as assistant ranking on the Appropriations Committee that handles any kind of bill that has more than $50,000 in spending, which unfortunately is most bills. And I also serve on the Education Committee, which is essentially the K-12 system. It is a policy-only committee. The Appropriations Committee handles the fiscal side of the K-12 system, which at this point is over 50% of the state budget. I also serve on college and workforce development, which is higher ed, including the community college system. And then I just found out a couple hours ago that I was appointed to the Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee. Very excited about that. And also the Rules Committee, which is the last committee that any bill goes through before it receives to be on the House floor. Just to let you know some of the bipartisan work that I've been doing. I started a bipartisan work group this year. I invited one of my Democratic colleagues to co-host it with me, and in the course of discussion and developing this work group, we invited another Democrat and Republican, so we have a host committee of 4. And really the objective is to get Democrats and Republicans in one room where we can talk frankly about policy and bills that are before the legislature. Surprisingly, there's not a lot of opportunity to do that. Even in the committee system, Republicans and Democrats will go in separate rooms after we have public hearings on bills and discuss those bills and how we're going to vote on them, and then come back and then vote on these bills. And sometimes Republicans and Democrats will cross over. Nobody's being told how to vote, but I feel like we're putting ourselves in a bubble where we don't have the opportunity to be exposed to the other side's point of view. And there's a lot of value in hearing the other side and where they're coming from. I know a year and a half ago I was talking a lot about bipartisanship, and that's still a priority for me and will continue to be a priority. I have 30 seconds, so quickly, I'll talk about the remote testimony. I didn't get any bills this last year, but I had a resolution that I co-sponsored with, as the youngest Republican in the legislature. I teamed up with the youngest Democrat, and we co-sponsored a bill that is bringing remote testimony to the House committee system. The Senate has already been doing this. We like to joke that we're very behind if the Senate is ahead of us. So we will have 4 sites across the state. Columbia Basin College is the nearest site to us, and then Spokane, Ellensburg, and Bellingham. Representative Jenkin's committee, Community Development, Housing, and Veterans is one committee that will be participating. My committee, College and Workforce Development, is the second committee, and then Local Government is the third committee. So if you go to the legislature's website, there's information on there on how to participate. But my objective was to deal with this whole issue of the dangerous pass that often gets closed and people having to drive to Olympia, take days off work, find childcare, pay for hotels, gas, all of that. So it's a way that we can bring government to you and be more accessible. And with that, I stop.
There's a question that came in via email before the meeting, and it's been brought up several other times, and let's get it off the table now so we get on to more productive sorts of things. Matt Shea, Spokane Valley, LD4. Maureen, would you like to brief us on that issue? We're not.
I don't really know a heck of a lot about
Okay.
it. He's in the house, he's probably.
I was deferring to you as the senior person. That's
Much
fine.
more information in the house, because that's where he serves.
Really good. Bill?
Well, we can both say something on this, I guess. Yes. Okay, Representative Matt Shea is from Spokane Valley. He's been under a lot of fire. Actually, not just recently, but for the last few years.
10 years?
Yeah, Maureen knows the history. But he's very conservative, and he's very, very socially conservative, and he lets that be known. And it's hard to hold him against a personal view. It's hard to hold it against a person. But in this case here, there was some investigations that were done, and the investigations have come up with some circumstances. None of it has been proven in a court of law to this point. So there's accusations, there's investigations, and but there's really nothing that's proven. However, it looks pretty damning. And so what the House leadership did was tried to reach out to Matt Shea several times. They were able to get a hold of him once because they wanted to find out questions on his side of what's going on. And I guess he was on one of the phone calls with leadership, but just for a brief time, and they weren't able to get a hold of him again. So basically, all of this has gone on. There's mounds of paperwork and that the investigation put together. So what happened was, because it looked so damning, and because they could not reach him for his side of what was going on, leadership expelled him from the Republican caucus. And so he's not, if you look on Republican House of Representatives caucus, his picture or name isn't listed on there. And so they expelled him from the caucus. They also, his seat on the floor will be moved. And they also allowed him to have an aide. So he still will have an aide, because what leadership really feels is that the voters put him there. So they can't go against the voters who put him there as far as expelling him or voting to expel him, that type of thing. There has been no vote to that effect. And so as of right now, he is still a member, and he's not a member of the caucus. He has an aide, and he has a vote. So a lot of the people in the caucus especially on the call, because we've had a couple of caucus calls about this. A lot of the people in the caucus are very concerned that he hasn't been tried and found guilty in a court of law. And that's what I can say.
Please. Thank you. Okay, so just to give some of you who might not be familiar with what was happening, the House of Representatives commissioned a report that took about 5 months long. You may remember the standoff in Walla County, Oregon. Individuals took over a federal facility, which is illegal, vandalized, which is illegal, and stole property, which is illegal. And the report found that Representative Shea was involved in planning that. So I read the entire report. It's about 108 pages. There are, the last few pages are references to exhibits and with witness statements, but those were never turned over to the House of Representatives. So no one has seen them other than the investigators. That were our third-party independent, hired with the consent of both caucuses. So I contacted the chief clerk's office and requested those documents. I also asked them at that time if any other members had requested those documents, and the only other person was J.T. Wilcox, our leader. So they are going to provide those likely within 2 weeks. We'll have the exhibits, which will be the information that I need in the form of screenshots, email copies that are directly from Representative Shea. So as Representative Jenkin said, everything that could be done against him as punishment to this point has been done. The only other option would be expulsion, which is a constitutional process and requires a 2/3 vote. I assume that the investigators have a reputation to protect, and what they put in the report is accurate. But I need to verify that through this additional documentation. Once I have that, assuming that it aligns with the report, then I think expulsion would certainly be considered, and I would likely support it.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Brian?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Quickly,
Seriously,
please.
I think that Representative Jenkin was too kind. So thanks for being here tonight. So this independent investigation report that Matt Shea planned to take over the Malheur, helped plan the Malheur National Bravo takeover. Shea played a role in 2 other armed conflicts against the U.S. government, not the Russians, not the Iranians, including recruiting armed militia members to host federal law enforcement agents. So your leadership has kicked him out of your closed-door internal caucus meetings, stripped his name from the website. Republican Minority Leader Wilcox has called for Shea to resign. Jenkins has said he's very related to violence. Could you agree that this crosses a line for someone who is an elected official? So my question for each of you, your party leadership has already stripped him of any connection to your Republican Party. Would each of you explain how his actions against the United States and our federal government make Representative Shea an appropriate member of the Washington House of Representatives? And would you support expelling Representative Shea from the State House? And I have each of these pages for each of your staff members because I want to hear from you. Thanks.
Do you feel you've already answered the question? Or do you want?
so are his actions appropriate against the federal government?
I can answer. No, that's a great question, and and that's what's going on a lot in talking to Representative Wilcox. He's put up with a lot of heat. He's the one that's been taking most of the heat. He's extremely frustrated because Representative Shea hasn't really contacted anybody and sort of left this on the table. And that's where it's at right now, is on the table. There's a lot, like you say, there's a lot in that 100 and some page report that was given to all of us to read. We read it. And like I said before, it's pretty damning. But until all the information's there, I can't say whether, just like on any policy, until you get all the information, there's no way that you can commit that you're going to do this or that. You just can't. But it looks pretty damning. I sit next to Matt Shea on the House floor. I hear that he's going to be moved, but just because I sit next to him, and just because we're in the same caucus, doesn't mean that I'm going to do anything different with my principles and that type of thing on my final decision on that, if that vote comes up.
So I think I basically answered the question after I received the documentation for the report. Assuming the report is true, then I'm going to support expulsion, because I think all of these battles are legal battles, that there's an established pathway for fighting legal battles, and that's the court system. It's the only appropriate way to fight a legal battle, not through violence, which seems to be an approach that he and his supporters have taken or considered. So I mentioned my new committee assignment. I'm taking Matt Shea's place on civil rights and judiciary because all of his committees have been stripped from him, and I don't think that was mentioned before.
Thank you, let's move on now. Maureen, I'm sorry.
Just for a second,
Absolutely.
I just add. I guess my feeling is with Representative Shea, you really can't have it both ways. Are you going to work for the government or are you going to work against the government? And to me, he's carrying a title of government official representing 137,000 constituents, just like the rest of us. And to me, his actions have been very counterintuitive to a person who would be serving our government.
Is it on something other than Matt Shea?
This would be for all the elected officials. How are we doing with the completion of Highway 12, the final phases? Any updates?
I mentioned that. Start off, Skyler. You correct everything I say that's not quite accurate. He's good at that, though. We worked for years together. Correct my inaccuracies if I have any, but we had a meeting with the port today, actually, about that issue. And there's, with the initiative, it sort of spun things into a different mode in Olympia, where the threat of taking funding from specific projects, one of them being Phase 7 of the Highway 12 project, of which there are 8 phases, with some promise that the federal government is going to kind of foot the bill for the 8th phase, and the state is kind of incumbent upon the state to fund Phase 7. And that again now has been put on a kind of a hit list of the governors for potential funding that might be stripped. The funding was already appropriated in a previous biennium, so it's a little disingenuous, but again, it's one of those things where I'm not sure the DOT, if this is accurate, Washington State DOT, it's never really been a pet project of theirs, but I would submit to you that again, I think in my comments earlier, the value of this side of the state with the tourism and the fact that we have people coming to visit, I want an excellent infrastructure system coming into my town as well. And most places, very few exceptions, there's a 4-lane highway going into most areas of economic development and places like ours. And I think that just in a fairness, it seems to me that we should be fighting strongly to keep that funding intact for 7. And then, of course, the fiscal conservative in me, it says, whenever you delay a project, it costs a heck of a lot more. And timing is everything in this game. If you've got obligations or commitments out of the federal government to be appropriating monies at a specific time, they're basing that on the timeline that you have on Phase 7. So we don't really want to set that in flux either. So my hope and expectation is we go back and make the point that our area deserves this highway. Our people deserve a safe highway. Our economic community on a whole deserves a good infrastructure system for moving our goods. And, we are on the map, and we need a highway that indeed indicates that as well. So I would implore folks to kind of keep that on their radar screen, and if you're feeling like talking to your governor or any of our offices, quite frankly, feel free to, put in a word of support for that, because there's a lot of, we're already through phase 6. It seems kind of imprudent to drop a project with 2 phases left to go. So, can you help me there? Anything to add to that?
I would just emphasize that I think it actually does make a difference if you email the governor's office, because ultimately the governor is the head of the Department of Transportation that is making this decision. I think it makes a difference if you could engage the governor's office and just share, if this is a project you support, share its value with the governor's office. I think that'd be very helpful.
Does this group think it's a project to support?
And I'd like to add something too. Highway 12 has been a #1 priority since I was elected, and it still is. We got to the point, there was a lot of heartaches that went on in Tucci and that type of thing at the meetings there for phase 7. And there was a lot of work that was done. And now we're ready to go just around the corner, and the rug is pulled out from underneath us. We need it for all the reasons that you both have said. And there's a couple of projects in our district, also just right outside of Walla Walla County is the Lewis Street overpass, and that was also pulled, and that's huge. So we got to continue working, and we are. We'll get, well, we can't promise anything, but I think those type of projects have to be done.
I just have a question. Dorothy Knudsen, when will we find out what percentage of people in Walla Walla voted for the $30 tabs, which is at the bottom of all of this? Could we just go to the election department?
You can go to time out for elections and hit it. Yes, it's right there.
Yeah, so then we find out we shot ourselves.
Precisely, and we did.
And we did.
Yes. Norm?
Yeah, kind of a general question here. Wondered if the Republican caucus, you could sit down with your brothers across the aisle there, brothers and sisters, and make a change to the fact that for many years now, Washington State has the most regressive tax system in the United States. It weighs by far most heavily on the poor. We're listed as a blue state, but we're not in Walla Walla. At any rate, it seems shameful and certainly nothing to be proud of. Where do you think you could make a start changing this?
We'll be real quick. I'm probably going to let Skyler take that one, actually. But Norm, I would agree with you, and I just don't think that isn't something that hasn't been looked at. And frankly, we're going to be in a world of hurt because our tax system that funds our highways and our roads is under big attack right now. And as technologies go forward, we have to change technologies as well. I think there's been a huge movement on the state's part incrementally to try to promote green energies, but also with a recognition that, you can't come in and slam the old coal energies, or you have to kind of be careful when you're making that transition. And I think that's all people attempt to do, but I do think that the reality is our taxes are not going to meet the needs of our infrastructure system. And as far as our taxes with income taxes or B&O tax, you're right. There has to be some major restructuring of our tax systems on many levels.
I agree. Normally I would hear after that statement, I'd hear a question about income tax, but I didn't hear.
Mine.
Okay, so I'll answer that question because I think that's where a lot of minds go. And I had the tremendous pleasure of meeting with the Walla Walla County Democrats right after election. And we covered this question. I thought it was a very productive conversation. I'm glad that they allowed me to come have that discussion with them. But putting the policy itself of income tax aside, just looking at the logistics of getting that implemented, if that was the best approach. There are so many barriers to doing that it's nearly impossible. Our Supreme Court repeatedly has said that a progressive income tax would be unconstitutional. So the process to amend the Constitution involved a 2/3 vote in the House, 2/3 vote in the Senate, a ballot measure to approve the constitutional amendment. I'm sure you all know that. You've seen constitutional amendments recently on the ballot. But the voters have repeatedly rejected it as well. So we have this constitutional barrier. We have a barrier on the ballot as well. So I don't think an income tax is achievable or practical to pursue. We have a sales tax exemption on food, which I think is a really good thing and really is designed to address part of that issue. And I'm not saying that's not the solution to the entire problem, but that's one area that we do have an exemption that is designed to make the system more fair. And I'm open to looking at other ways that we can do that. So feel free to shoot them my way, and I'll approach them with an open mind.
In the House, we have a new speaker, and I fully expect that there's going to be some surprises and what type of policy will be coming before us. And income tax may be one. I know capital gains most likely will be. Income tax is scary to me in that you're not going to, if we were to get into an income tax, you know that they wouldn't stop taxing in another category, say property tax or sales tax. You know those aren't going to go down. And so if you start an income tax, you also know that that's never going to go down. It's going to only go up. So we have, in my opinion, we really have to be watching out and be vigilant of any change like that could happen. I'm also very concerned last year with a lot of this taxation stuff that came through in the dead of night on title-only type bills. That could happen again if they decide not to take our policy that we have before them about limiting title-only bills.
I heard some individual answers here that were pretty good, but a couple of years ago, Representative Neely talked about what he believed would be a special commission or committee, bipartisan, that would work independently for a while, trying to find a way to restructure the entire tax system in Washington, to provide some sort of a comprehensive plan for how we might go about raising necessary funds into the future. Did that special committee or commission ever come into existence? And if it did, where does it stand now?
I believe there was some kind of a tax work group, but I don't know the results of it. It doesn't sound like we're familiar with it. But I can look into it and get back to you if you like. I think I might have your email.
Yeah. But sometimes it's tough, because sometimes the extracurricular things that people have great intentions of following through with, we tend to all get a little overwhelmed that those things fall to the side. Schedules never permit meeting unless you're meeting at 5 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. And I mean that seriously. That may in fact be what happened in this case. I don't know, but I know that over the years there have been many folks who have, been on our appropriations and ways and means committees that do have great minds, Representative Neely was one of those for money and taxation issues, and also one of the greatest people I ever served with. Just a brilliant guy, and I know that over the years there have been folks like that have really tried to pound their heads together and see if we could come up with a better approach, because Norm's absolutely right. We have a tax system that's going to be failing us, and we're all going to have to make some serious changes. So I wish I knew more about it. We'll all look into it too. We'll begin checking into it too. Yeah, I suspect Noel would be.
Okay, I'm switching gears. Heather. I'm interested in hearing from each one of you where you get, what are your primary sources of news about Eastern Washington State? And I want to give you an example. I use Capital Press for environmental news for this whole region, and I'm interested in hearing if you have any sources of news in general, not just environmental, for Eastern Washington State that I haven't thought of.
What sources of news, she's asking, would we rely on for Eastern Washington news? I'm not sure they're any different than what the rest of you would rely on. I certainly like the Rural Light, Columbia REA Rural Light magazine. I think it's great, and it sort of exemplifies what living in these types of communities is all about. And as far as news, I get my news off the internet. We get news footage sent to us about our district specifically, and then also other issues around the state that we get in our internet every day. So that may be maybe an advantage that we get is sometimes people kind of go through it, scrutinize what we want to read, and send that to us. But probably about the same thing you're reading. You get it in your news. So.
Well, I know, I look at a lot. I received the UV, and I get it a day after, so sometimes because I'm in the process, but still it's a way of keeping current with the community on what you want. If you're asking more on the news, state news and that type of thing. There's something that's called TBW, and TBW, they broadcast every session, and it's pretty informative. So that's probably the one that's closest to us is TBW.
Generally, when I wake up in the morning, I go to news.google.com, which is going to have New York Times, Washington Post, a variety of sources. And then I don't get a physical copy of the Union Bulletin, but I log on to the UB website every day. So that's my local news. The Tri-City Herald occasionally, but primarily the Union Bulletin is my local news. And then the legislature, actually the House Republicans Communications Department, puts out something called the Capitol Buzz. And it separates news articles across the state by topic. And I use that just because I receive it in my inbox every day. And I'm pretty sure that's available to the public if you want to sign up for it. We just had a call today, and the communications department is creating a new section of our House Republicans website.
Hi, I'm Walker from Prosser in Benton County. In fact, Mr. Jenkins here may remember me. He spoke at my high school graduation when he was a member of the Prosser School Board. And I'm really grateful for all the state does in funding education that has enabled my high school education that let me go to Whitman College. So thank you for that. And speaking of my generation and your support for us. I know this isn't necessarily what everyone wants to talk about tonight, but as a young person, the issue I think about most is global climate change. As you may know, the city of Tacoma has issued a declaration of climate emergency, acknowledging the scientific reality that we have 10 years as a civilization to achieve net zero emissions if we want to avoid irreparable harm to our global climate and economy. The protectors of the Sailor Sea have been pressuring Governor Inslee to issue a statewide climate emergency, including halting all fossil fuel expansion and officially empowering people who are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis in our state. Would you support these measures, and how do you see Eastern Washington playing a role in tackling the climate crisis? I specifically addressed this to Representative Rude since he's the youngest member in front of us here today.
Thank you for the question. I am on record on TPW saying that humans have an impact on climate change, just so you know. We had a bill. Let me just say that I think it's important that climate change issues are important. I'm especially interested in plastic pollution. The more I read about it, the more disturbed I am by it and the way that it contaminates waterways and the like. I think when it comes to emissions and somewhat water issues, it's really important that Washington State doesn't try to tackle a global issue at a state level because it's not going to work. So we can contribute to a solution, but we also, if we try to do it ourselves, have the potential to create a competitive disadvantage for our economy. And I don't want to drive business out of Washington State. So that can't be the only driver when we're talking about policy related to climate, because that would be irresponsible, but it also has to be a consideration. So I supported a couple bills that were, I was one of the few Republicans on some environmental bills. We created a state recycling resource center this year. It's still kind of in the startup phase, but I'm excited to see how the state can help facilitate recycling, whether it's glass or plastic. Electric vehicle, there was a bill related to electric vehicles I remember voting for. So I just think we have to be careful and thoughtful in our approach, but it's also going to be a team effort, and Republicans and Democrats need to work together to find solutions to this issue, and I want to be a part of that conversation.
I think when our businesses that provide energy can work together and one does not feel threatened by the onslaught of the new one, I think that's very important. And as far as policies promoting green energies, I certainly support those. But again, like with the devil's always in the details about how we go about structuring a system that starts to incorporate those new energies. And so that's really kind of what our job is to kind of discern what the language of those mean and what the impact is on those industries. And that means people come in and they talk to you, about their industry, and you do your best to get both sides of the issue. And frankly, I don't ever hesitate to ask a lobbyist for one industry to tell me exactly what their competitor is doing. And to me, then I get to get a great perspective, from both sides, and I do the same on the other side. And I think that, again, just taking that information, discerning it, and trying to figure out how best we can go about a procedure that gently phases out a long time and long traditionally held use for energy and the way that we've used energy into a new technology. I just find it very important that we try to do as least harm as possible.
Well, and as far as climate change is concerned, yeah, that's a huge issue. We all know that the climate changes. Is it human caused is the big question. I know that I've seen climate change just in the long period that I've been alive, and it continues. Does it have to do with gravitational pull? Does it have to do with the orbit around the sun? Does it have to do with us?
Well, would you support declaring a climate emergency? Yes or no?
Part of the conversation is that we show respect to each other, somewhat like at a Thanksgiving dinner, because we sometimes have some intense disappearances. So, when you ask a question in the form of a question, or a statement in the form of a question, usually is more effective in getting a response than just kind of shouting it out. So, Bill, let me give you another shot at this and then go on. You're good? Okay. One question, there we go, okay.
Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm from Dayton. I came with some young people that are very worried about the climate and how it's going to support their future. As a longtime Washington State resident, I just want to thank the state for having supported the development of solar technologies. I've got solar panels that were made in Washington and inverters that were made in Washington. And I bought a car that was built in the US that uses that electricity and that wind power and that water power. And so I've been the recipient of some fabulous Washington State policy that is supporting my young nieces and her friends' future. And I just encourage the state leadership to pursue those possibilities because they're hope-giving.
Someone else back here.
Over here.
Over here.
The Washington State Penitentiary has got a program that is prison industries, is what they call themselves. They build some really fantastic projects. If you want to see one of their pieces of handiwork, go to the office at the fairgrounds. And the problem is they're treated like second-class citizens because of the simple reason that they are not eligible. Legislatively, it's never been provided that they can market their products on the free market. And they are losing a lot of opportunity to service a lot of people with products that they would find very useful. And I'm trying to work with them now. And it's been argued in the past that they are not allowed to market on the free market because they produce things so cheaply. Well, if overhead was taken into account, if they had a contract to operate as an independent contractor to do whatever their job description is in the prison industries, and also if they were a contracted homeowner that paid for their overhead of their shelter, their food, utilities, legislatively, what can be done to get them eligible for the open free marketplace for their products?
The reality is that it's very attitudinal, and you're absolutely right. I remember a time when we offered Pell Grants to inmates in the penitentiary. And I heard from more constituents about the fact that somebody who had committed a crime against another citizen would have the right to qualify for a Pell Grant, and their kid should rightfully, who has not broken the law or committed a heinous crime. And so therefore, we stopped providing Pell Grants to our prisoners. Prison industries has been, again, another one of these areas where we run into that conflict of, as taxpayers, funding the incarceration, if you will, of those individuals who have committed crimes. Should we allow them to compete against the private market? And I'll give you a personal little testimonial here. When I first got to Walla Walla in, good God, 1983, my family was the Blue Mountain Memorial Gardens Cemetery out on Myra Road. And that was what we did, and we made burial vaults and liners out of concrete. They go over the casket, you know what I'm talking about, yeah. And suddenly this gentleman sends us a letter. He's getting out of the pen in a short while. He's been working in the concrete plant up at the pen when they actually did more industry type of things like that, mostly for on-site purposes though. And this guy said, I can sell you vaults and liners cheaper than what you're making them for. And the reason he could do that is because he was using taxpayer-funded concrete. I mean, his materials were much cheaper. Now, I don't know that that's the case with the furniture and the beds that you shared with me last year, Gene. I think that was last year. But that's always the conflict, is people's belief that people that are incarcerated should not be able to get the same advantages or better advantage than people who have not broken the law. I would submit to you, that those people are getting out of jail. 98, 99% of them will be back out on our streets. And if we do not provide them some type of a level of education that gives them a fair break and or a skill, a marketable skill that they can acquire during their time of incarceration, we might as well make it productive. But again, that takes money. Thank goodness we've had Mrs. Buffett to support some of our programs up at the Penn. But the reality is it's kind of an attitudinal thing with constituencies about what do we provide to people in penitentiaries who have committed heinous crimes. We've been really working hard, especially with the juvenile community, where we know the brains haven't formed adequately and crimes were committed, and we need to kind of give those kids a second break. There's a little less compassion for the older and recidivized inmates. And so this is a very complicated subject, but you know what, we are working in that direction, and we do want them to have some type of marketable skills. And if that means building things like that or being able to market those, we might look at some opportunities. Right now, we can only exclusively market some of those dry goods into state facilities. Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. In the last couple of years, there has been some legislation to help prisoners in different prisons. Matter of fact, Noel Frank, a state representative, had a bill, and it went through. I was in favor of it to help prisoners and get them acclimated. I think it's something like Senator Walsh just said. I think we do have to be cognizant of that, because pretty soon they're going to be out. And we need to have them helping society. And so anyway, I think that there will be more legislation to come.
I think it's important to look at the value that we're getting from those construction opportunities. And I do wonder if maybe right now inmates can get an associate's degree while they're incarcerated. And there are educational opportunities. If they don't have a GED, those programs are provided as well. I just wonder if there's maybe a bigger bang for our buck if we're providing those educational opportunities and then providing support as the person transitions back into society. So I was actually at the penitentiary today talking with the folks who provide educational opportunities and that transition into the community. And they're doing a really great job. I was extremely impressed. I learned that 70% of inmates at the penitentiary over the next 10 years will be released back into communities around the state. That's a lot. So we definitely need to be preparing these people to be successful outside, so they don't end up back in prison costing us something like $60,000 a year. So I just want to get a good return on our investment.
My name's Judy, and Skyler, you kind of touched on the recycling issue, and I know that communities all over the country, not just in Washington State, are dealing with the fact that the commodities that are being recycled, many of them are contaminated. But the issue is that for communities, we can't, as a small community, address the issue. So what is the state doing so that we can, number one, educate the populace so that people are recycling what is recyclable, and then also what is the state doing so that those products can be processed locally rather than being sent to China?
Thanks for the question. The State Recycling Center, I think, is a really great first step. And it was actually Jared Mead, the guy who ran that remote testimony resolution, who primed that bill to create the recycling center. And so I'm hoping that that can be a resource for local governments to create recycling centers. It's actually one of the legislative agenda items for the city of Walla Walla this year is a regional recycling center. And I'm supportive of that. We can make it financially viable, then we should do that. And maybe this issue with China not accepting it, maybe it's going to be a blessing in disguise. Maybe we will learn how to recycle and be responsible for ourselves and our own waste. So I think there's a great opportunity, and I'm really excited to see what the recycling center can contribute to that conversation. But it's not up and running yet. So over the next year, I think we'll really know. And if we need to do more than a recycling center as a resource, then I'm open to doing that too and working with Representative Mead on that.
And that is, thank you for that, Skyler. It is one of the Walla Walla's priorities is the recycling center. And when we go through the communities, we talk to the county commissioners, to the port, and also to the city. And it's something that's needed throughout. So we are going to be working and doing whatever we can for that.
Well, having just returned from a 10-day trip to Mexico, I wish that you could get a nickel for a plastic bottle in Mexico. We'd all be millionaires. It was very scary, and it's a shame because it's such a beautiful, beautiful landscape, and people just, it's disgraceful. And so, I've always believed in recycling. I know it's a Yeti, but it's because I'm not using plastic bottles. It's important to me, so I'm with that.
In last year's legislative session, a bill called House Bill 1074 was passed through the legislature, and it raised the age to buy tobacco up to 21 from 18. I think that took effect January 1st. So let's see. Senator Walsh voted against it. Senator Walsh abstained from the vote. Representative Rood, you voted for it, and then Representative Jenkins voted against it. So could you tell us why you voted the way you did, and if, here's another thing. Altria has donated to all three of your campaigns, and Altria supported the bill, but Senator Walsh abstained from the vote, and
You can't abstain from a vote.
oh, sorry, she was absent from the vote. You were absent from the vote, correct? Yes, sorry. So I was just wondering if Altria's position on the bill affected your votes in any way.
Clearly it did not for me. I don't think it did for any of us. But that was actually the first bill that I signed on to after I was elected. And the reason, you asked about the reason for that vote, there are 18 and 19-year-olds in high school. And typically, I feel like high schoolers are going to associate with themselves. Once you graduate from high school, you're in a different peer group. And when there are members of your peer group that are eligible to purchase tobacco and share it, distribute it with everyone else that is younger than them, I think it was warranted that we increased the tobacco age in an effort to get tobacco out of our schools. And the data is there to show that that's effective. It turns out that we didn't need to do that because the federal government did the same thing, followed our suit. Yes, it's followed the state's lead. And so I think it's an important step. Data also shows that most users start when they're 18 and 19 and 17. And even 16, which is showing that there's distribution to those younger age groups, and if we can intervene in that distribution, I think will have a significant impact on tobacco use and in turn even savings to the state. We'll lost revenue, but I think that's a legitimate reason when individuals' health and lives are at stake.
Okay, yeah, I was opposed to that for a couple of big reasons. The first one is that at 18, you're considered an adult. And by being considered an adult, you can be drafted, you can go to wars, bad things can happen to you because you're an adult. I really feel that if we want to change that, the adulthood to 21, then I wouldn't have a problem with that. But if for one instance you're an adult, but you're not really an adult because you're not old enough to smoke, even though you choose to, I do believe in personal choice. And an adult should be able to, since we consider them adult, should be able to consider their own use their own personal choice and common sense. And that's what I was hung up on, was the adulthood.
So last year, Washington State put into place Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, which is a fabulous act, in my opinion. Has some very real significant benefits for workers at a minimal cost to those workers and employers. And the price tag on it for an employer, such as myself, is very low. However, in order to report and submit the required taxes, there's a huge impact on a business's bookkeeping costs, because in a state that has Microsoft and other high-tech industries, that site has got to be the kludgiest thing anybody ever saw in their life. It takes multiple trips. It's really, really expensive to comply. So is there anything the legislature can do to try to get employment security it's employment security side, I don't know who owns it. Is there any way to get some relief to businesses who are trying to do the right thing when it costs 10 times as much to do the reporting as it does to actually remit the funds?
Thank you. And thank you for your brutal honesty there, too, Nance, because often that's a little bit where the issues fall with us when we're doing things that are quote-unquote unfunded mandates. We do it to schools all the time. We also do it to businesses. And that is one of the issues that has come up, and you're not the only one, not the only employer that has mentioned that, and I'm sure the radio industry is working on it. There's a great gal who represents them in the legislature named Tammy Fellon, who I've known for years, and she's just super. And we've had a few discussions about this. We'll probably continue to have some of those discussions. Any way that we can streamline any process in government, we're happy to try to do that. Again, when we pass bills that just sound so wonderful and warm and fuzzy on top, sometimes you got to dig a little deeper and you find out that they do cause a little bit of angst among some of the people that have to utilize them. So that's just a good example. Appreciate your honesty on that, but I also do support the fact that we should be able to allow parents to bond with their children and be able to have a mechanism to do that through some type of insurance or something.
Yes, I agree with Senator Walsh. Is that, yeah, it is something that's good for family. In the way that was set up, it's not to be utilized a whole lot. And by what I understand, to qualify for it. If you look at the qualifications, it's going to be difficult for anybody to qualify. There will be a lot, but it's not like 100% of people are going to be able to take advantage of it. I have a small business, and yeah, it would be something that would cost me, but we all care about our employees, at least we should.
If you've got a suggestion.
We'll take this offline, because I've got some real suggestions.
Right. Online to me on the internet, let's get somebody, and Ellen and I kind of, okay, give some of your suggestions and concerns. I think it's a great idea.
And that goes with anybody that has that same question. I would love you to contact our office and so we can look into it further.
Thank you.
I'm going to save us some time.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Washington State has made some changes in how they're funding K-12, or at least how they're figuring the funding. And that seems to be continuing to cause some problems. Where do you see any action on that? Do you see anything happening in this next session to do anything about this?
I'm going to let Skyler take that.
Since I'm on appropriations, it handles the money for K-12 and education, it's a policy for K-12. And I neglected to mention that I offer to all of our school districts in this legislative district, there's about 17, the opportunity to do a day of job shadowing, for me to job shadow. So I've spent about 50 hours in schools since session got out in May. It's been incredibly informative, and met with administration, talked about different fiscal issues. I think special ed is an area that really needs to be addressed. To answer the second part of your question, I don't think anything's going to happen in the supplemental year because the way that the legislature operates, it's a 2-year budget, pass the 2-year budget the first year, and then come back and tweak it a little bit the second year. So major changes, whether it's policy or budgetary, are probably not going to happen this year. But it's a great opportunity for us to plan for the next session and see what we can address, especially special ed. I know that Representative Jenkin has a bill on high poverty learning assistance program, and that's one that I really want to see worked through because it creates this situation where a school will either qualify for all of the lab funding if they have more than 50% free and reduced lunch, or if they're just under 50%, they get no funding. So it doesn't seem like a fair system. And I think there are issues like that we can kind of piecemeal this a little bit, and certainly K-12 funding is extremely complicated. It's over half of our operating budget, and we're going to have to continue to tweak it for probably decades to come. But we need to keep chipping away at it and making it better and better all the time.
Peggy Needham. Oh, gotcha. This kind of goes out to all of you, Skyler, you're in education, affordable housing. We're dealing with a mental health crisis in our state. We're dealing with rising suicide rates, access to mental health services, access to addiction services, being rural and being on the east side. We have even less of that in our communities. So I'd like to know from you, how do you see, as far as affordable housing, one of the things we talk about is housing first, to get people stable. Skyler, in the K-12 and college system, we're seeing huge increases of mental health problems, depression, stress, and anxiety. 1 out of 4 or 5 kids that are attending our schools have some sort of mental health issue. How are we going to prevent the issues from getting worse by the time they get older? So I look at K-12 and I also look at housing, stable housing.
Who's first?
Thanks, Peggy, for the question. You're absolutely right. And I think that, the strength of our mental health system has been exacerbated. I think that we have issues of, look what we've done with the K-12 system, how much intervention work that we have to do through our school systems that just is not basic work that frankly most homes, those are lessons that are learned in home. And I think the recognition, we've got parents working a couple of jobs and we have terrible issues with drug and alcohol addiction, and other things that come into play that send our kids to school unprepared. The best thing we can do is try to get parents to understand what being a parent means and appreciating an education system that's provided in this country and doing whatever we can to empower them to truly step up to the plate and and try to guide that child through the system. And, you know, we did a little damage ourselves. We changed up curriculum a lot. Like every decade, we changed the way we applied some discipline in education, and maybe threw some parents off. Certainly threw me off kilter a couple times when things would come home with my kids, and I go, oh, I have no idea what that is. And I was a good student, so you know, I think to myself, we've done this to ourselves a little bit. You know, we've invited a few problems, but none the least, people are a feeling of hopelessness, and I think that's where we need to start trying to return to communities. And social media has been no help at all. And you know, those are some of the things we have to deal with in our ever-changing communities and our ever-changing world. That if we don't kind of continue to work within those nuances that are coming upon us every day, and try to adjust our families and our families' lives, but still keeping the center of the family as the core, you know, we're going to be hurting. So that's why I promote early learning. I promote, you know, doing things. And frankly, the other thing I'm really promoting strongly with an 88, 87-year-old parent is long-term care. We have got to do better for our seniors. So that's another issue that I would like to throw in from the beginning, from the first question that I'm working on this year. Yeah.
I think, and I agree, a lot of it does start at home. I believe that every child needs to have an adult in their life. A lot of times it's not the parent's fault that they're having to work 24 hours a day, but there needs to be some way to get an adult in a child's life. That's one of the big things that we did in Prosser, was we we got a hold of the Boys and Girls Club, and we were able to bring a Boys and Girls Club there, and that really helped. Really helped get that all achieved. And serving and you've served as mentor also, but being a mentor, there's no better feeling to the mentor. I think they get that way more than the mentee. And there's several nonprofits around town here that do the same thing. We need to help those nonprofits and especially the ones that are concerned with family, so that we can get an adult in the child's life.
First, Peggy is an incredible advocate for these issues. I hear from her regularly, and it's great, always useful information. University of Washington is expanding mental health training. That happened this last session, and it was a pretty much unanimous vote to do that. I recently saw, I think it is called the Healthy Youth Survey, that is tragic, like made me want to cry reading it, about young people, kids who are filling out the survey talking about depression and suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts and things of that nature. So there's definitely more that needs to be done, and I think that means having mental health professionals available in our K-12 system, and working, I was assigned to a task force on community and technical colleges, counselors, to determine what the need is, what the appropriate ratio is for students versus counselors. So there's definitely work going on in that area, and I think it needs to be addressed in K-12, and also higher ed, and also in the community. And a lot of these issues tie in. Substance abuse and mental health tie in. They both tie into homelessness. And so we need to make sure that we're addressing all of these issues together and really finding out what the root cause, really treating individuals as individuals and identifying for that individual what their circumstances are that led to the issue, and addressing the root causes of the homelessness and substance abuse and depression and all those other issues. So these are really big issues that a person can dedicate their lifetime to. K-12, like mental health. So all the feedback we can get, the better.
Don't you think it would be good?
As a symbol, I would request a yes/no answer, and then there's a follow-up. It's related to health care. Do you believe health care is a human right? Yes or no?
Yes.
And then my second question is to some of the rural areas in our district. How can the legislature provide assurance to the citizens of those far-reaching areas access to reliable, high-quality primary care, which includes mental health therapy?
Well, it's always different, location, and when you have so few people living in certain areas, it certainly becomes, a real battle to see how you're going to be able to staff facilities like that, or make accessible healthcare or medical facilities available. The reality is we have critical access hospitals out there that are very important and very viable in some of these small communities, and we have to keep them alive. And I had a little debacle with the nurses this year. I made a comment trying to save my critical access hospitals in an amendment, and said something like, I suspect some of those folks do play cards during their shift, which was not saying I think nurses play cards during their shifts. It was simply trying to differentiate between the demands of that workforce, and do we really need to have union rules that are mandating specific breaks. And at some point it kind of, common sense sort of goes out the window if you're, flying in the face of a union mandate. And yet I would submit to you, with 39 critical access hospitals, we've got to do whatever we can to help them reach the bottom, to stay in the black. And 60% of them already are in the red. So, when I say stupid things like that, it comes from passion. It comes from me trying to understand and make folks understand that, these are things that are so vital and so important in our communities. If we're going to have communities, we're going to be able to have a little less density along the I-5 corridor and people that are miserable in the traffic there. Well, then let's incentivize them to move to Eastern Washington and provide the infrastructure, provide the health care, provide the services that people, and these quote-unquote amenities that people have come to expect in a modern society. And so it's a great question, and again, it's one that I think we struggle with. We try to incentivize our students when they come out of our medical schools to go back and serve in those rural communities. We give them some relief from their school bills and their student loans. Thank you. So we do try to do things that incentivize healthcare homes all over the state for our citizens. But again, you choose where you live, and sometimes you got to take, a little less accessibility when you live in some of those smaller areas. But we're trying. Anybody?
Well, I totally agree that
you have to answer the yes first question.
Oh, now what was the question?
Do you believe healthcare is a human right?
Should be what?
Do you believe healthcare is a human right?
Oh, yes. Yes. Now, personally, I went through heart problems this last year, so really had a feel for our health system locally. I was told that if I'm going to have open heart surgery, I should go to Spokane or I should go to Seattle, that they got the best doctors there. But then after looking, I was very impressed with the doctors that we had just right here locally, and not here, but in the Tri-Cities. And I've got to say, I got the best care I could ever have gotten, and I was so impressed, and I feel, and they checked out, and everything is perfect. So I'm grateful that we've got health care that can take care of us without having to drive 300-400 miles, or having people that may want to come visit you have to drive 300 or 400 miles. And we're having problems right now. The Altria, not Altria, Altria, the health care, yeah, in Yakima County, they're going to be discontinuing within the next couple of weeks. So that's going to put Sunnyside, it's going to put Yakima into the same situation that we were at here recently when we were in transition. I understand that the new hospital is, most people are pleased with it, but I guess sometimes that can be a matter of opinion, but I hear good things. And so health is very, very important, and I wish that more can be done at the federal level.
to answer your first yes or no question, if human right means that everyone is entitled to state-paid healthcare, a single-payer, socialized system, definitely not. I don't think that's in the best interest of patients. Similarly to other systems, we have a combination in this country typically of capitalism with a bit of socialism as a safety net, and that's what we do with healthcare as well, with Medicaid. You specifically mentioned, I believe, rural healthcare. One capital budget request that I had was for the Dayton General Hospital, $250,000 to expand dental services specifically for Medicaid patients. And so that ended up in the capital budget, and I believe they're starting construction on that soon. But because Medicaid rates are below market, it's not practical for a private dental office to do 100% Medicaid, for example. I mean, they would go under in about 2 seconds. So you have to be really careful about the ratios of private pay versus Medicaid to make sure that their business model is sustainable. And in Columbia County, to my knowledge, there's only one dentist that is accepting only dentists at all. They can't handle the Medicaid load. So because of the way that funding works from the federal government, it is financially viable for the Columbia County health system to provide dental services for Medicaid patients, but they need a facility space. So that's something that I did with the support of my colleagues to make sure that we're serving that population in a rural community. But I mean, that's just dental. Dental has other impacts on the whole human body, but that's just an example I wanted to bring up.
We have run to 8:30. We still have folks who are still sitting here, still standing here, so we'll continue. I'm going to go back here.
Hello, my name is Josephine, and I had a question for all of you. My question was, why do you think it's taken so long for the state of Washington to ban conversion therapy for youth of the LGBTQ community? And why do you think it didn't happen any sooner? Because the mental health of youth and LGBTQ youth should be very important.
Well, actually, I think many people, frankly, were unaware of it. I think, as you probably very well know, you sound like you're versed on the LBGT subject, that LBGT was sort of kept under the carpet for a long time. And once the awareness of how many LBGT folks we have in this world sort of we all became aware of that, we started learning more. And in the legislative process, that conversion therapy, once you started hearing some of the techniques that were used in trying to convert the sexuality of a child, you just would think we had witch doctors out there. And I thought it was very important that that wasn't allowed under the guise of being able to have a practice that you are able to incorporate your own philosophies in. I wasn't buying it. It sounded like torture to me, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. And so, that was a no-brainer to me, but I also know that there are people that feel that people's choice to medical treatments and how they care for their children is up to them as parents. So it was kind of a parental control issue, as well as a protect the medical industry issue and the professional opinions and applications and disciplines that are used by our doctors out there. So I'm glad it was banned, and I think that just understanding LGBTQ youth and get, us all having a basic understanding that these are people that deserve just as much as respect and dignity as anybody else, that we really shouldn't be treating them in that fashion. And so I was proud to co-sponsor that bill.
To answer your question about how long, why did it take so long? I don't know. I think society is just slow to change sometimes, and legislators are members of that same society. So thankfully, we're making progress. It has been banned, and I think there's more work to be done in that area. Conversion therapy is one horrific thing that happened and was legal previously. This year, I worked with my Democratic colleagues on LGBTQ commission and brought an amendment to that bill that added legislator advisory members. So I'm the House Republican advisory member for the newly created LGBTQ commission, which is designed to address issues like that, like our homeless youth, LGBTQ homeless youth that are disproportionately impacted, suicide rates, that interestingly, I think, are really the source of that problem is the tremendous amount of judgment that is coming from people who maybe parents who can't accept their child and send them to conversion therapy. Like, yeah, that would make anyone suicidal, right? So, so I think there's a lot of progress to be made on that in that general LGBTQ issue, and so I'm really happy about the LGBTQ commission and the recommendations that that will be introduced to the legislature over the next few years.
Yeah, sure, I'll be first.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I just want to say that when that bill came on the Senate floor, it was one of the most impactful moments of my 28-year career over there, because in a floor speech that I gave, which I don't give them very often, when I do, they're impassioned, and in the floor speech I gave about that bill, I had 3 members of the Senate, Republicans, come up to me in tears and say that they had changed their vote based on my speech on the floor. And I'm not trying to toot my horn or anything, but I gotta tell you, when you go out on the floor to make a vote, you typically know exactly how you're voting. And in many cases, you've told most of your constituents, or a good number of your constituents who care about the issue, how you're gonna vote. And those 3 members said, now I've got to call back all the people that I told them I was going to vote the other way and tell them why. And it was one of the most impactful and one of my proudest moments in the legislature was knowing that one of those doggone floor speeches that you give actually impacted people to change their vote and change their mind on a subject. It was a great honor.
No, and I feel strongly for personal choice. If somebody, it's their personal choice, especially in the case of being an adult. Like I said before, it's your personal choice, and that's what I said about the smoking issue. So, and I'll always feel strongly for personal choice.
Way back. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm admittedly ignorant to your voting record and kind of policies, so I'll ask a pretty open-ended question. I'd love to hear all of your understanding of prevailing wage laws and your opinion of them in general.
Well, prevailing wages is very, very good for some and very hurtful for others. If you're a union worker, prevailing wages is a good thing because you're going to get a chance, I suppose, to. And I've never been in a union, but it could give you more money when you work if you're working. If you're a business, you want to try to make everything pencil, and sometimes by paying prevailing wages, the project won't pencil and the project won't get done. So the project so right there that hurts. That's basically what I feel on prevailing wages.
I don't really have a lot to say on that. I think there's good and bad. I met with unions and talked about it and thought, like, now I understand where this is coming from. So I think maybe it has a place when it comes to laws between a state like Washington and Idaho and areas that are close to the border, and how we treat contractors that are coming from Idaho over here. But I'm not on the labor committee. I'm very far from an expert on that issue. So I'm sorry I don't have more to give you.
Well, we're in an unusual area of the state, and when Hanford was, into huge construction mode many, many years ago, decades ago, it was forcing prevailing wage laws to have window washers up at the port, for example, getting paid $18 an hour. And again, this is a couple decades ago, which huge money, huge wage for someone in Walla Walla. And frankly, if you're going to do something like that, I guess you would want to balance whether you would like to have the jobs at a little less money, or do you want to have fewer jobs at the greater salary. So, it's always a balancing act, and again, sometimes we run into, because of the Hanford and the federal influence and the money that's come in on that, sometimes this area gets kind of adversely impacted by prevailing wage laws, but I don't necessarily object to them. I think a good wage and a family wage is a great thing to have, but again, not at the cost of potentially providing fairly decent paying jobs in communities that really desperately need them.
Do you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, just to follow up, and I mean this with total respect. Sure. I would love the opportunity, because it sounds very clear that you don't have an understanding of prevailing wage laws and how they work. So if given the opportunity, I would love to have that discussion with you. So you had first mentioned that, like,
tell me who you are.
Sorry, my name is Deacon Lenich. I am with the Laborers Union, but you kind of falsely represented that union members benefit from prevailing wage when in essence they set the prevailing wage. And prevailing wage laws are in place to level the playing field, to keep some contractor from Idaho, which is a great example as a right to work state, bringing a workforce into Tri-Cities or Walla Walla and paying them $10 an hour when the average wage for the same job in the county is, say, 18. Yeah. So it creates a level playing field. So I don't know where to hold this mic without being too loud. Or I'd love to have this conversation at another time. But thanks.
One of the things that I would like to have happen, and I wondered what you would think about this, is why can't we locally have workshops on where our tax money goes? I don't think most people really understand where their tax money goes. For instance, I had a friend say to me, well, why should I pay taxes for kids going to school? I don't have kids. I had another person say, well, why should I have to pay taxes for people for payroll taxes when I don't work? So I think that what I would like to see happen is why we pay taxes. Because I'm an ex-Republican, and believe you me, our motto was no more taxes, no more taxes, no more taxes. And what I'm concerned about is that people don't understand where their taxes goes and what it pays for. And so could we have workshops about it? What about high school classes so that we know where kids, look at the money we've taken out of our 1 to K through 12 programs. I don't think people understood about that. Like my friend's saying, why should I pay for taxes for kids? So why can't we at a local level teach each other and have workshops about where taxes goes? Because the other thing I'm concerned about is that socialism is going to be the big word this election. socialism, anything that you don't pay for yourself, that doesn't come out of some capitalistic system. We pay taxes, that's a form of socialism. Social Security is a form of socialism. Is it so terrible? Do we need to have some kind of balance between capitalism and socialism? And let's have some kind of education about our taxes. Maybe we could solve the problems in Washington and have a better tax system if we ask the people about it.
Do you want to respond? I think that's a great, I think like the Chamber of Commerce put on something like that.
Seriously,
Yeah.
I am quite serious about it. It's just people know where their tax money goes.
I think we could also check with our House staff and see if we can get some budget staff to come over here and present and answer questions.
Have a workshop about it, so people can come and say, hey, what about doing it this way? What about doing it that way? Maybe if it was from bottom up, rather than top down, we would have a better tax system.
Hi, my name is Allison, and I have a question that's pretty big in Washington, which is about immigration. And since about 1 in 7 Washingtonians are immigrants, it's pretty relevant, especially in our area. And Representative Jenkin, as a wine owner, very important to you. And first I want to thank Maureen Walsh for voting yes on Keep Washington Working last year. That was a really important bill, and everyone really appreciated it. It was fighting for this. One bill that's going to be coming up next, this short session, is going to be specifically about the warrantless arrests in courthouses. So it's going to be about making sure that ICE with administrative warrants can't come into courthouses and arrest people who are coming in for traffic tickets or something like that. And I personally accompanied a 17-year-old who was there for driving without insurance, and he's been here since he was 2, fluent in English and Spanish, and he was just terrified, shaking with fear that he was going to get arrested and sent to a facility away from his family. And there was another guy that was there, and he was specifically there at the courthouse because he had been detained and was in detention and missed his court date. And so then he had a warrant put out on him. So the whole system is obviously very complicated, and what's happening, especially in Ephrata, is these courthouse arrests. So if a bill comes up and if it comes to a vote, will you vote yes on this specific issue about prohibiting warrantless arrests in courthouses?
First of all, I don't ever commit to a vote before I see the language, because that would get me in a lot of hot water. And I'm working with Maureen for 4 years and then being in the House for a year. I definitely know better than to do that right now. And I'm not familiar enough with that system because it's technically a federal issue happening in our state. I don't know how the warrants are issued. It sounds like without a judge.
Yeah, so an administrative warrant is one that ICE signs themselves, and they're not legally binding. So if ICE shows up with an administrative warrant that is not signed by a judge, you do not need to go with them. But ICE presents it as you must come with us, you have to come with us, and to resist that is a crime. So you're kind of caught in this system where you have to know the legal language, which of course English is their second language. There's a lot of challenges with that, and this bill would address it.
It sounds like someone was trying to do something illegal, but an illegal end with maybe illegal means or something. So that's troubling to hear that.
And ICE does this very frequently in our state. It's a very common issue.
I don't know whose bill it is.
Yeah, we get it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like working on education, I know that the state constitution gives the right to all children, which means all children, which means undocumented children. So there are areas that I swear to uphold the Constitution. That is my #1 obligation. which means that I have an obligation to undocumented children to provide them a quality K-12 education. Really, the federal government has failed and created this situation that now we as communities and state government are having to deal with the fallout, which is unfair, because I mean we don't have to deal with it, but it makes it very challenging to deal with really a federal problem at a state level, because we're not really designed for that.
We have
But
opportunity to, so.
I'm interested in reading it.
Oh, okay,
And-
actually, I have the names of the folks. It's
And a bill number, if you have it.
Senator, there's no bill number yet, I don't think. Senator Wellman and Representative Ty.
Not sure. Okay, well, I'll definitely get in touch with Ty in case she's in the house and read it and consider it, but that's all I can commit at this point.
Yeah, and that's, I would want to read the bill and see what it is. I do know that immigration is something that we've always done, and something that we need to do. The farmers need immigrants to help with the crops. But then you know, there's a difference between legal immigration and illegal immigration. And we need to enforce the laws that are on the books. And I think that's our obligation. Now, obviously, if the laws changed, then we would be enforcing that law that's on the books. So I would want to read that, though.
Okay, good.
During the climate week of this last school year, on Alder Street, within the Edison Elementary School zone, there was an individual in full body armor, open carrying an assault rifle. Edison Elementary is our bilingual, primarily Hispanic school. Local officials felt hindered in what they could do about it and said it depends on Olympia. Would you support a ban on assault rifles and high-capacity magazines?
And I'm Cindy Metler, and I would just like to ask you, what do you think of this dam issue that our governor thinks you should take out these dams that provide hydroelectric power?
Mr. Moderator, what you were saying earlier about having respect here, I think part of that is to give straight answers to questions that are posed. So I'm just going to ask one more time for a yes or no. Would you support halting fossil fuel expansion in the state of Washington?
I think we've already kind of reached that point where we realize that it's not a promotable industry anymore, and that we need to gently taper out those said fossil fuels into a greener energy type of system. Again, doing least harm as we make said transition, which will be a constant transition, just like a lot of things we're doing now. They're constantly changing. I can't keep up with the phones.
No, and it's great that we're able to have
So
wind.
just a yes or no question.
Oh, my bad, sorry.
Yeah.
Repeat the yes or no question.
Would you support halting all fossil fuel expansion in this state?
Fossil fuel expansion?
Yes, so the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure, such as like a new proposed refinery, for instance.
Okay.
That's
more, okay.
No new.
Yeah, I think whatever energy that we can get that's going to be helpful to all of us is where I would be. Fossil fuel is oil. We've got a lot of oil, but I think we need a little bit of everything.
So, sir,
And we do
yes.
have.
Is that what you're saying, that you would not support that?
Just wanted to.
Yes.
You go ahead. I didn't know if you were.
My answer would be yes.
That you do support?
Not halting expansion.
I think you would not support banning any further
Expansion of
banning.
fossil fuel.
I would not support banning fossil.
Okay. You've got to answer for that.
Yeah, that's my voter's answer.
So my answer is yes, but I also think it's unnecessary to even, we have one coal plant in the entire state in Centralia that is scheduled to be closed very soon. That's the only fossil fuel that I know of in our state.
Again, we've already
Are you
kind of
talking-
reached that point. You know,
Yeah,
right now the state is trying to make the conversion to cleaner energies. And we've made major strides in the state to do so.
We're going the opposite direction right now.
But it also harkens back a little to, we can do all kinds of great things in this state, but we need to get everyone on board, all other states and all other parts of the world. I mean, that is truly what we need to do. We've done a tremendous part to lessen our carbon footprint, but we've got to get everybody on board too. It's got to be a united, universal effort. So,
With that, we're closing it down.
Did you want two other questions?
They didn't answer. I want a simple yes or no.
Okay, you're past this. Yes.
Okay, so for me on assault rifles.
And I can pass the legacy.
So for me, that's no. Constitutional reasons, I feel obligated to be a no. And then the dams, also very against removing them because of transportation benefits, carbon reduction, transportation, I just said that. I think there's tremendous value. Clean energy.
I would not be in favor of banning assault rifles.
I would not either. I think it's the shooter, it's not the equipment. And I also believe there are constitutional issues that do come up with that. We need to figure that one out. Do I love these hyper weapons? No, I don't. And so I do have angst, and I totally share your concern. On the other hand, in some of these school shootings, I kind of wish some armed guard had been there to avert additional deaths. I don't totally believe in gun-free zones anywhere, and I think we'll move on to the fossil fuel thing, but I think we have to be really careful, and I think, again, it's always a balancing act, and sometimes we make decisions that we regret making because of unintended consequences by those actions, and that is something that, being 28 years in the legislature, I have learned is vitally important, that we need to slow down the process a little bit. It's so rapid fire right now, mistakes are getting made, and we've got to come back and correct them, and we need to be more thoughtful, and we need to be passing less bills, but making sure that we are fitting the bills and the legislation that we pass in this state and that we already currently have in this state to our needs. And that's really cleaning up our laws is probably a better approach than constantly passing more.
Can we just talk?